Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll make a start to the meeting. Item number 1 on the agenda is announcements on the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Could I also ask that all mobile phones are switched off or set to silent? This evening, the meeting is not being live streamed, and that is because of officer capacity and resources. However, I understand that the meeting is being recorded and will be put onto the council's YouTube page at a different stage, besides which I see that Councillor Kandaka is filming, so we should be okay. Item number 2 is to receive any apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Colin Cape. Are there any other apologies to report? Nope. If we can make sure that's minuted, please. Item number 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of April 2023. I've been through those minutes and I believe they are a true and accurate record, so I will propose those minutes. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Beetham. Any member wish to speak on those minutes? No, I see no indication, so we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you, that's carried. Let me sign these off. Could you hand those down? Thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members would like to declare? Councillor Beetham.
In regards to my employment has recently changed from George Eliot Hospital into Y Valley NHS Trust. I have sent an email. I just believe it's just a matter of update. Thank you.
Nope. Okay, so item number 5 is public consultation. I've not been made aware of any members of the public this evening who wish to speak. Item number 6 is questions to Cabinet. Councillor Golby, who's the Cabinet Member for Housing, is attending the 9th Angel event, which is taking place at the moment, so she is obviously absent for obvious reasons. However, if there are questions that you'd like to put to Councillor Golby, if you'd like to indicate those questions, we can ensure that there is a written response. So are there any questions, Councillor Golby? Councillor Kandaka.
Questions for Councillor Golby. One on page 66 of our agenda, it said the new hostels open in June 2023. It's the one in Stocking Ford. I just wanted confirmation that that date has actually been met and it's actually taking people in the 14 rooms. And secondly, you may know, Chair, that we had flooding on the ceiling of one of the units on Cleaver Gardens about a week and a half ago. That was a result of some maintenance that hadn't been done from the last time it happened, and it needed a capital project because the gutters aren't fit for purpose and climate change. So I was going to ask Councillor Golby if the resourcing issues which caused that work not to be done have now been solved, because it was identified a year and a half ago that it was a problem, but we seem to have had a big turnover of staff in housing capital projects. So I just want some reassurance that we are either up to staff again or going to be up to staff to get these issues sorted. Thank you, Chair.
Response to those questions, but both myself and Councillor Shires have received your call-in request over Cleaver Gardens, so no doubt that is going to get some attention over the forthcoming month. Are there any other questions, Councillor Golby? Nope. Okay. So we'll now go to Councillor Gutteridge, Cabinet Member for Environment and Health. Are there any questions to Councillor Gutteridge? Councillor Kandaka.
What you're responsible for is our climate change liaison, etc. roles. And we're having a management restructure as well with our middle managers, etc. And I wanted Councillor Guthrie to give us an update on where action on climate change was going to sit in future, and if we were going to actually be having a budget to do stuff. And I particularly asked this because the new proposed cinema, I've just read when we do a new building, we have a BREEAM energy standard forecast for it, and it gets 1 out of 13 points. The new cinema will be incredibly energy inefficient, which really alarms me. And so I wanted Councillor Guthrie to ask him who was going to be the point of contact for climate change, and are we going to start to do something about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kondaka. Yes, I have already met with the Director, Kevin Hollis, and I have already met with the Assistant Director now, Katie, and we will be putting plans into action, and we will, as soon as we've got ready, we will notify you. Thank you.
I think you've worn it out pressing it so much collectively. I just want to ask Councillor Guthrie also if he's been attending the Warwickshire climate change meetings and if he had anything to report in terms of where we're going as far as the county is concerned. Thank you.
I have attended, but I've missed the last one due to a clash of meetings, which I couldn't get out of the one meeting.
Ah, there we go. Right, any further questions? Nope. Okay, Councillor Guthrie, thank you for your attendance this evening. You can leave, you can stay, it's up to you. So, item number 7 is the item from Warwickshire Health and... Oh, Councillor Guthrie, I apologise.
I'll shout because you've got one. I didn't know whether you wanted me still here for the briefing note that the Parks Department.
I'm happy for you to stay for that item if you'd like to, but it's entirely up to you. So,
I'll stay and listen.
you'll stay and listen. That's the answer that every cabinet member should give. So, item number 7 is the item from the Warwickshire Health and Wellbeing Board strategy annual review, and I'm pleased that we have the Director of Public Health and the Warwickshire Health and Wellbeing Delivery Manager here this evening to give this report. Just yourself. That's fine. That's fine. Would you like to present your report to our committee? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I'm Shadia Agbolan, I'm Director of Public Health from Warwickshire County Council, and I'll be talking through the annual review of Warwickshire's health and wellbeing strategy this evening. The presentation is going to cover some of the progress that we've made in terms of the health and wellbeing strategy and our joint strategic needs assessment. It does present a lot of information, so I'm not going to go through everything. It is already in the packs. But just to say that this is work that is real evidence of collaboration and joined up working across the system. So this is not all Warwickshire County Council public health work. We've worked really closely with our NHS partners, with our partners in the health economy and the voluntary sector and Health Watch as well. So if at the end of this there are questions that might be best answered by some of our partners, I'll be happy to take them away and provide a written answer. So, Health and Wellbeing Boards, I'm sure people are aware, formal committee of the local authority charged with promoting greater integration and partnership between the NHS, public health and local government. They have a statutory duty to produce joint strategic needs assessments and health and wellbeing strategies for their local population. The next slide describes our journey so far and captures in quite a simple way a lot of the achievements since 2018. So between 2018 and 2020, we started a program of place-based joint strategic needs assessments. That was before I joined Warwickshire, and I remember reading through this place-based needs assessment and thinking, wow, this is brilliant. And I don't know how many people have familiar with it, 22 place-based assessments that looked at the different places across Warwickshire to identify what the needs were, and they have informed a lot of the health and well-being work that's happened subsequently. In 2019, 2020, we started to develop a strategy. 2021 March, the strategy was adopted, and a range of other publications, including a domestic abuse joint needs assessment. We published a NOS to 5 GSNA children's joint needs assessment as well. A pharmaceutical needs assessment was published in September 2022. We developed an ICS strategy working with our NHS colleagues in December 2022, and notable as well is the formation of the integrated care system in July 2022. We've also established a children and young people partnership, and a Director of Public Health annual report was published early this year in January, which I'm sure that most people have seen already. So lots of activity has happened in the last couple of years. So the next slide reminds us of the priorities that we adopted when we produced the strategy. The strategy spans 2021 to 26, 3 main priorities around helping children and young people have the best start in life, helping people to improve their mental health and well-being, especially around prevention and early intervention, and reducing inequalities in health outcomes and the wider determinants of health. At the time these were adopted, health inequalities and the wider determinants of health had started to gain traction as the areas where we needed to intervene. And I'm really, really pleased that we did adopt this in 2021, because we now know that what makes us healthy is the wider determinants of health, not necessarily access to healthcare. So the annual review and some of the information presented in here highlights the progress that have been made against these priorities, and also provides a brief snapshot of changes to key health and well-being data indicators. So where has the data changed? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse since the time of the health and well-being strategy publication? We haven't changed the priorities. They remain a key focus, and we've agreed that the 3 priorities will remain for the next 2-year period, because data and intelligence suggests that improvements are still to be made in this area. So the 4th slide describes the progress we've made in terms of the first priority, so helping our children and young people have the best start in life. Lots of progress. We had the Child Friendly Warwickshire 2022 event, which provided fantastic opportunity for young people to talk to various mental health services and organizations. We developed a safe and well-checked pathway for pregnant women. I'm not going to go through every single thing on those slides, just to touch on a few. Smoking in pregnancy vape pilot is one that I'm particularly proud of. That was launched in Warwickshire North, and an evaluation has been commissioned with Coventry University to assess the effectiveness of that pilot. And we have formed the Children and Young People Partnership Board as a subgroup of the Health and Wellbeing Board. In terms of the data relating to this particular priority, you can see that the percentage of physically active children has decreased from 43.1% to 41.2%. I'm not sure how long we will continue to blame COVID for some of the data that we're seeing now, but COVID did have an impact on physical activity across the board, and it is part of the reasons that we've seen this decline. The good news story is that conceptions in women under 18, what we know as teenage conceptions, has decreased from 13.9 to 13.2 in 2020. The data is quite old, but that is the data we get that is reported. In terms of helping people to improve their mental health and well-being, we have again launched a suicide prevention strategy that was endorsed in January 2023. A serious violence prevention strategy has also been published, and Wellbeing for Warwickshire. I don't know how many people remember Wellbeing for Warwickshire, and now Wellbeing for Life as well. So we have an enhanced mental health service offer with a 24/7, 365 days a year single phone number helpline to help people that might need that sort of instant low-level support. A couple of changes to the data as well. Percentage of people with self-reported low happiness score has decreased, so that's a good news story. But percentage of people with a self-reported high anxiety score has increased, and emergency hospital admissions for intentional self-harm has also decreased as well. So in terms of the final priority around reducing health inequalities and the wider determinants of health, most health and wellbeing board partners have now adopted a health in all policies approach, and I know that we are familiar with that in the north here. Tackling social inequality strategy also progressing well. We've commissioned an integrated physical health service. So what that means is that we've brought together physical activity, diet, nutrition, smoking cessation into one service where people can access this almost like a one-stop shop. We've made a lot of progress across the 5 key areas of the Preventing Homelessness in Warwickshire strategy, and we have a DASP, what we call the Drug and Alcohol Strategic Partnership, that's been established as well to strengthen referral pathways in relation to the services for people struggling with drugs and alcohol abuse. So just very briefly to touch on progress on JSNA, we have a statutory responsibility to produce a joint strategic needs assessment as well, and that's a list of every JSNA that's been published: domestic violence, mental health needs assessment. I've talked about the notified JSNA as well, and these publications are invaluable in giving us an indication of where we need to target resources. We have a program of work that includes a healthy aging DSNA, physical health of 6 to 25-year-olds, disabilities, and in an LGBTQ GSNA as well, also in the pipeline. There's a very robust program of work that decides what theme is going to be explored as GSNA. So the 8th slide talks about looking ahead into the future. We need to continue to develop our place partnerships as well. We have established the 3 place partnerships, North, South, and Rugby, that are working really well. And there's a lot of activity that is going on to ensure that we continue to use them, especially within the context of the ICS. Very little on the 9th slide around the discharge community recovery service. I'm not going to go through that. That's a really busy slide, but just to mention that that was launched and with the aims and objectives to increase number of people receiving rehabilitation after acute hospital admission, and that has been reporting some very positive outcomes as well. And the final slide is on system activity. I've touched on Wellbeing for Life and what's next for Wellbeing for Life, a Coventry and Warwickshire Integrated Health and Wellbeing Forum that sits within the bigger integrated care system as well, and we clear pathways into the ICS, the ICP, and the ICB, Integrated Care Board. And I think the final slide is something is just describes all of the partners involved. So like I said at the start, lots of partners have been involved in producing all of the work that's captured on this slide. So it has certainly been a joint team effort and fantastic example of collaborative working. Thank you.
As always. I'm going to start off on this, if I may. I'm just looking at the joint strategic needs assessments, and I'm looking at some of the areas that have been looked at and what's going to be included on the upcoming work programme, and I'm not seeing anything on here about loneliness. Now, the point I wanted to make on this is, first of all, I think it's something that absolutely needs to be included on the JSNA, but also it seems to be a theory that it's just elderly people who suffer from loneliness. And I was reading a report the other day that essentially is saying that millennials are suffering from loneliness just as much as the elderly, because they are not integrating into their communities as people would have done 15, 20 years ago. So are you able to tell us why that's not included in the JSNA?
Strategic Needs Assessment Program Board that brings together partners from across the system. And there's a prioritization process that every single topic has to go through, and a list of criteria that determines what will be agreed as part of the work plan. So just like you've said this, in terms of loneliness, for example, usually what happens is people will bring a range of topics, ideas into the room, and then there's a scoring matrix, and you score it against perhaps maybe is there a strategy, for example, that's already been developed that might answer the question, what is the national mood like, what are the strategic levers that exist, is there somebody else that is doing this piece of work? So those criteria are used to determine whether or not a particular topic will be subject to a JSNA. But now that you've mentioned it, that is a really valid point, because there's social media, there's internet, there's gaming. It is making, I totally agree with you, younger people are more lonely than they would have been 15, 20 years ago. I can take that back to the GSNA board and ask that perhaps a reconsideration in terms of the prioritization is given to that particular topic.
recommend as well, actually, that we as a committee perhaps write to the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board at Warwickshire County Council to bring that to that board as well, to make sure that it is very much part of the JSNA. Have you got that down, Maria? Is everyone content if we do that? I see no dissent. Okay. Are there any other members that wish to speak? Councillor Kandaka, and then I'll come to you.
One of the things this report does is it looks at quite sort of laggy data, because obviously it's quite strategic and high level. But one thing I feel is becoming more of a problem is suicide. We lose a lot of people in this borough, money problems, gambling problems, or relationship problems. And yeah, the chair brought up loneliness as well. And it would be useful to know if there's sort of any live indications of things that are getting particularly more of a problem, and particularly with interest rates and the cost of living crisis. It's good if this GSNA can sort of say, well, there's actually, we need to put a bit more onto that area, because I do feel a lot of people are really struggling, and we do hear about cases, and obviously they're not that well reported for very good reasons, the individual cases, but it just feels like we're getting more people really struggling with life. And yeah, I think people need to talk more, and I think it'd be good that we told a little bit more about the strategy on that and where we're going. Thank you.
I am aware that we are seeing an increase in the number of suicides. We're working really closely with our colleagues at the at OHID, Office of Health Improvement and Disparities as well. There is evidence that the cost of living appears to be playing a role. What we've done is recently appointed a real-time suicide surveillance coordinator, and she's been in post about 2 months now, and has been instrumental in bringing together this data. So we are aware of exactly what you've just said. Paula Jackson in my team, one of my consultants, is leading on that work to try and understand exactly what is going on, and whether what we're dealing with is a particular cluster or a completely isolated event. But we are aware. Commonalities include the fact that they all fall within a particular age range, commoner within men, but the cost of living appears to be a real issue. So I am pleased that we have a suicide prevention strategy which was launched in January. I'm pleased that we have a team, we have a real-time suicide surveillance coordinator. There's a lot of resource that's been thrown at this. This is a Coventry and Warwickshire-wide work, and we've pooled resources together to do it with Coventry City Council. So that is definitely something that is high on our radar. The portfolio holder for health, Councillor Bell, is very much aware. I have briefed her on a couple of occasions about what we're observing. So yes, we are aware.
And if you could send any sort of notes or a bit more detail on that, 'cause I think it's an area that it is useful for councillors to be aware of. The other thing I wanted to mention was the stuff on people becoming less active, children and adults. I actually became more active during COVID, and then I've started to lose it again. But we do a lot of good stuff that's never advertised enough. We do Walking for Health, we've got park runs, we've got the Harriers, we've got all sorts of stuff going on. But I think it is something we really need to push. And one of the things that's really annoyed me is how little cycling infrastructure we've got. And I just got the counts from the county council about their cycling projects. 95% of the money is being spent in Warwick district. And if you look at your health ideas, we need to be spending some of the cycling budget actually in the areas where actually the people are least active and actually need to get more exercise the most. So I do hope you can sort of kick your colleagues in transport and say actually all this new cycle routes is actually a health and equality issue, because we also tend to put them in nice areas. Like, I mean, we might get one in Wellington, but there's very little chance of a cycle route in Camp Hill, for example, which would cause, well, there's a bit of a cycle route, but it doesn't join up, So trying to target some of the active travel stuff in some of the areas with the biggest health needs would be really great.
Hi, thank you for your report. I love JSNAs. I love all the information and the stats that come with it. I've spent many years working with health in looking at ways to combat some of the various issues. And back when I worked in Coventry, we were dealing with all these issues then back in 2013, 2014, 2015, etc. And we're back there again. There is actually nothing different that we're doing now that we weren't doing then. And while it's great having the strategies to say this is what we need to do, we need to improve health, we need to improve income, we need to support people, prevent loneliness, etc. It's actually what are we going to do that? Are we, or are you, using some of the learning that was achieved in Coventry, where the voluntary sector and health worked very closely together and prevented numerous suicides, people losing their homes, increased income, had a strategy and a project for when people were discharged from hospital to ensure they were going home and it was safe and that discharge was properly, from the working that with Macmillan, with TB services, because you could be reinventing the wheel that's already been turning, had the results, was supported, through Professor Marmot, and you would actually be able to say, this is the strategy, this is what we're going to do, this is how we are going to do it, because strategies are great, but unfortunately, you need the detail behind that. And we know that the cost of living is going to have a massive impact on everything from loneliness to exercise to health to mental health to early death to how children achieve, to drug and alcohol misuse, absolutely all of it. It all goes hand in hand. But we have this data from previous years. And when funding was put in to tackle that, are you going to be using that information and that data to prevent you reinventing the wheel?
Answer nearly everything you said as best as I can. One of the things that always comes to my mind when I'm asked questions like this is something a portfolio holder said to me many years ago. Public health are really good at identifying what's wrong, but what do you do about it? And that's exactly what you've just said. We do all these GSNAs and we produce these strategies, but public health, a lot of what we do is about influencing other people, because the levers that determine how healthy we are do not just sit with public health. They sit with transport, they sit with housing, they sit with the NHS, they sit within the wider health economy. So a lot of what we do is influencing our colleagues and working within those structures. And that is why we are part of the ICS. I'm a statutory member of the ICP. I sit on a number of committees, and we continue to work with our NHS colleagues to influence what's going on. Something else you said now is about all of the good work that happened in Coventry, Marmot City, and the funding and the resources that came with that made it possible for those things to be achieved. Unfortunately, we don't have that money anymore, and we have to now start to think about different and innovative ways to make a difference and to still try and achieve some of those outcomes. Numerous research, publications, papers have established a direct correlation in funding cuts and the outcomes that we're seeing now. And that's been established. What we're now trying to do is almost swim against the tide, because what's happened now is we're sicker, healthy life expectancy is worse, we're spending a lot of our time in ill health, and there's a lot of pressure on our NHS. What we need to do is go back to that time where we invest a bit more in prevention. The NHS is committed to that, and it almost feels as if we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. But my view is it will take a bit of time before that funding starts to be reallocated, when we start to have resource reallocation and bigger investment into prevention. It is starting to happen. And I'll give you an example. So the NHS agreed with us, the ICB, Systems Inequalities funding. We produced a Systems Inequalities plan and worked with our place partners as well. So North was part of that conversation to agree what we called plus groups. So which are the groups within our places that will benefit from this funding? An investment panel has been set up within the ICB, and we are regularly inviting people to submit bids into that. It's recurrent money. And it is disappointing if we're not able to give the money because we have to spend it. So we do have that, and that's just one tiny bit. And I know that, I mean, we've been criticized, that's tiny, and we really need to do it on a bigger scale. But it is a good step, it's a good starting step, and it is pleasing that our NHS colleagues are also on board with the prevention agenda as well. So I suppose the short answer is we need money to recreate those outcomes. The money will trickle down eventually, but in the meantime, we'll continue to do what we can to influence our colleagues, to do things differently, to embed prevention into everything they're doing. We're working with our acute trust to produce a prevention strategy, prevention frameworks, so that everything that happens has that embedded in it. Another example, very quickly, within our acute trust as well, what we've done is establish a piece of work that sees people that come into hospital achieve abstinence if they're smokers whilst they're in hospital, and when they're discharged into community stop smoking services so that they continue to maintain abstinence. That's an example of some of the work that we're doing, influencing our colleagues if we don't have the money and the resource to do it.
Thank you.
Just a few ones. So the first one is in regards to suicide strategy, as you said, recently approved in January. I was wondering, because especially as I know suicide is, I believe, the biggest killer of men below 50, I believe that's statistics, and that is something that is preventable in a lot of ways, and is something that everyone should really think about, be aware. I know that from talking to my county council colleagues, that getting men to talk about not just suicide but mental health, regardless of the age, is difficult. And I was wondering how you found in regards to engagement, in regards to your strategy and the data, in getting that data. And second of all, I was wondering if it was possible for us to have a briefing note, like Councillor Kandaka said, about what the actual strategy entails, because I know you said you've got a new person in post to monitor that. But I wondered if we'd have a briefing note specifically at some point about the strategy. And the last question is, how much of the physical inactivity is, or has any research been done by yourselves or any other trusts or partners? How much of it is a choice of an individual and it's their responsibility for it, or how much of it is access? Because I'm aware, for example, in Stockingford-Rec, we have all this green gym equipment and hardly anybody uses it for that. So how much of that is just sort of culture, and how much of it is personal responsibility, or how much of it is there isn't the access there for it?
Men, I will get that information across to you. I can't say for certain how that's gone and whether or not we had the sort of engagement that we wanted. So I will get that information. The second question about the briefing, definitely, yes. I know that the strategy was socialized. Hannah Cramp in my team led on production of the strategy, and I know that she took it to the police partnerships, but it might not have come to yourself, so I will get that circulated. The third question around how much of it is choice is something that I am quite passionate about. I think choice is very little, in my view, because if you create the conditions that will enable people to engage in physical activity, then choice becomes irrelevant because you've made it easy for people to engage in physical activity. There will be an element of choice, but I think for most people want to be healthy, most people want to engage in physical activity, most people want to do well, they want to eat well, they want to eat right, and they want to be healthy for their families. But that's where the choice question comes in. And when you think about principles like the hierarchy of needs, for example, people start to think about other things like being healthy and engaging in physical activity when the basic needs at the bottom of that triangle have been met. Now, when you think about the cost of living crisis, when there are more pressing things on the minds of most people, just engaging in physical activity might not be a priority. And that is why when you go to the gyms and you go to the places where you have to pay to access, you often find that it's the people who probably don't need to be there that are there. And that's probably because that hierarchy of needs, they probably don't have to worry about food, clothing, shelter, which is the basic human need at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I don't agree, and I know that some people will probably debate that, and I teach medical students, and they would argue with me and say, no, there is nothing, everything is a choice, and it's all down to personal responsibility, and I don't agree with that. I think there are certain conditions that make it impossible for people to make a choice. And I think it is when we start to influence those conditions, and they're simple, that those wider determinants of health, sort of houses we live in, the cycle paths that exist where we live, how much greenery there is, how accessible is the greenery. There's a lot of work that's been done with Sports England. They were doing some work around local delivery pilots many years ago. And they wanted to understand why people in certain areas were not engaging with physical activity. I used to work in Nottingham City, and Nottingham City was a local delivery pilot. And they asked people that question. There was a massive gym right in front of one of the most deprived, right in the middle of one of the most deprived parts of Nottingham, and they were not using the gyms. And they were asking the question, why? Is it really choice? No, it isn't, because we haven't made it accessible, whether accessible in terms of the price, accessible in terms of the welcome, the environment. There's a lot of access is not just about physical access. In terms of representation, for example, do they see people that look like them when they go into the gym? They won't use it. So there's so many things that go into whether people will make a decision as to engage in physical activity or not. And I think choice is a tiny bit, but a lot of people might disagree with me. But I think the environments, the conditions that we live in determine whether or not we're going to engage in those habits that make us healthy.
Yes, one.
So when we're looking at the strategies in relating to this, are we looking at what aspects that we as public bodies can affect that, or are we looking at also the broader things that we cannot, so the more societal things, or is it individual things?
Things that we can do as organizations. Many of these organizations are called anchor organizations as well. There are things that we can do and that we can influence. But there's also some things that would expect individuals to do. But the argument is you have to make it easy for the individual to be able to make that choice.
Contributions from members on this. So, Shade, thank you very much for your attendance, as always, and we look forward to seeing you this time next year. Thank you. So, we'll go on to our next item on the agenda, which is our report on autism. And we have several members of Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust here this evening. Is it Samuel, isn't it? I think you're going to be presenting our report, I think.
Presenting the report today. I'll take the chance to introduce my colleagues. My name is Samuel Keong. I'm the General Manager for Community Learning Disabilities and Neurodevelopment at Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership Trust. I've got Matt Jokes, who's our Director of Joint Commissioning for NHS Coventry and Warwickshire Integrated Care Board. I have Michelle Creswell, who's our Senior Joint Commissioner for Learning Disabilities and Autism, working on behalf of Warwickshire County Council, Coventry City Council, and NHS Coventry and Warwickshire ICB. And finally, I've got Dr. Richard Onion, who's our Medical Director for CWPT. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the report, I want to just flag up that we've made a slight adjustment just to improve the clarity of what we're communicating. So on page 32, we swapped it with page 31. In my slides, it's 6, swapping with slide 5. And in our version that was circulated digitally, we've put some red boxes that help to provide some clarity about some of the key areas that we're focusing on that slide. Without further ado, I'll start the presentation. So in terms of giving some background on slide 1, the transformational program for neurodevelopment was established in November 2020 with a system-wide representation. And really, when we went through trying to redesign our all-age diagnostic pathways and improve the offer for pre- and post-assessment support, we concluded that actually the pathways referrals to pathways had increased by 280 to 400%. And really, the current resource to meet the diagnostic demand was not sufficient, really. And there were several short-term funding pots to boost activity, but they made it quite difficult to recruit and sustain change. And really the key to success of the plan to reducing waiting times was to develop a pathway in the workforce and use a differentiated diagnostic model, which I can expand later if people are keen. Further background on slide 2, the CQC inspection was carried out between 12th to the 16th of July and it identified a number of areas for improvement. And one of the 5 key areas of weakness identified long waiting times for autism assessments and the lack of support for children and young people awaiting assessment following a diagnosis of autism. So while the written statement of action applies to Warwickshire only, this proposed approach was meant to address waiting times for assessment and pre- and post-diagnostic support in an equitable way across Coventry and Warwickshire. Slide 3. So we then, after that, the pre- and school age pathways were where the biggest pressures were noted. So at August 21, there were 3,875 preschool and school-age children on the waiting list for autism assessment, with a further 292 for ADHD. And in August 2021, the average waiting time was almost 2 years, with the longest wait being over 5 years. And there's a further breakdown in the table in slide 4. And how to understand that table is that each of those blue boxes, rows, columns represent the quarter for the relevant year. And those were the numbers of our autistic children waiting at the end of that quarter for an autism assessment. You will see that the numbers go from 2,563 in Q3 of 2019-20 to 4,381 as of Q3 of 21-22. And this was a slide that I moved to an earlier one. So apologies, there's quite a lot of information on the table, but there's really 3 areas that I want to try and focus on in this one. One of which is in the top row, you will see there's a number of referrals planned against a number of referrals actual. And what you will see is that there's a significantly greater number of referrals that have come into the system that's above plan. And that was some of the reference to an earlier slide as well. So you will see from 378 to about 361 of March 2023 this year, that there's significant increase in referrals compared to the 160 that we originally planned. The second thing to outline is that you will see on the longest wait of those contacted delayed for a non-CWPT reason is 245 weeks as of May 2023. I just want to qualify that that is a very small proportion of people that are waiting that long. And really, I think what we've tried to do is to deliver all the reasonable adjustments and to reach out to a lot of these families to try and get them in for an appointment as best as we can. And those are really small numbers, probably about less than 0.5% of our total number of people on our waiting list. Finally, the last thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the bottom row from August 22 to April 23, May 23, is where it looks very good, where the numbers on the waiting list are reducing. But actually, that's related to a care notes outage that we had back in August last year. And what's happened with that is that as a part of a cyber attack, we're still trying to recover our data. And although the care note system is back online now, we're still going through a huge process of validation and trying to reconcile what were some of the numbers that we manually recorded with what was on the system that we were uploading. So that number is still to be validated and doesn't include all the referrals, increase in referrals that we've witnessed to date. So I'll go to the next slide. This is a very encouraging slide, the last slide in our slide deck, where over the past year, since December 2022, we've delivered 4,619 assessments against a plan of 3,712. And this will be made up of priority cases and case backlog of referrals. Our longest wait at the minute is about 48 weeks against a target of 142 weeks. What I mean by that is that we've started to reach out to families when they've about 48 weeks ago, since the time where their first referral has come in. So if you were referred 48 weeks ago, we would reach out to you to make contact, to make an appointment to be assessed. We've got no one waiting over 5 years, and the lowest numbers waiting in 3 and the 2 and 1 year categories. As I mentioned just now, we've made contact to those families waiting less than 48 weeks to organize an appointment, and we've removed about 4,000 people from our backlog. And of the original waiting list cohort of 4,227 in December 21, only 225 people remain on that list. And really part of that was part of the significance of being able to deliver that much activity and autism assessments was because we were able to have the funding and to secure contracts with 9 different external providers to provide the additional capacity. And just to kind of qualify, it's quite a mean feat to be able to do that because each of those different providers have different criteria, and being able to triage them at the very start, send them to all the 9 different providers, making sure we match the right families with the right provider, taking reasonable adjustments into consideration, and also try and keep our systems up to date is very challenging. Thank you. We will now take questions.
Chair. I should say before, should have said a bit earlier, that I'm also the SEND Cabinet Member Support at Warwickshire County Council, but I've got my other hat on right now, so shouldn't have any effect here. Just in regards to Nuneaton and Bedworth, do you have any specific statistics that you can give us today in regards to it? Because I know it's Coventry and Warwickshire wide, and it would, of course, be really good to see how we compare to the rest of Warwickshire for that. I'll let you answer that. Thank you.
Aren't able to give the Nuneaton and Bedworth specific data. We're still recovering from the Cairns outage that was witnessed by the cyber attack. You have the data, but we're still validating the data. What I can say is that based on historical references, that Nuneaton and Bedworth probably make up the guts of about 16% of our overall referrals. How they're seen in terms of the assessments, it would be difficult to tell because it's based on chronological order and clinical priority.
Councillor.
Hi, we met previously at the meeting that we had, so it's great to hear the updates and that everything's moving along quite nicely. I recall from the conversation we had previously, you had the one-off funding that was enabled you to catch up on all the backdated cases and get everything moving. One of my many questions is that going to be continued funding, or are we expecting to be back in this same situation again when the funding runs out, particularly as we were receiving more referrals than expected? And then I want to come back with some others.
In terms of the funding, there were 2 elements to the funding. There was a non-recurrent one-off funding, as you say, which has been used to increase capacity within CWPT and with the 9 providers that Sam talked about. That money was in place last year. It's also been extended into this year, so we've got the money for this year. There's a recurrent element of funding, which is to increase capacity within CWPT, and the initial modelling that we did at the start of the process the recurrent funding was based on the level of capacity we needed to keep the waiting time at whatever level we reached. As you say, we have seen increased referrals, higher than we'd expected, so we're currently going through a process of modelling that through to see whether there's any impact in terms of the waiting time that can be achieved. So Sam talked about the written statement of action, the response to the SEND review. Within that, we had a target to reach of 13 weeks maximum wait by March 24. That is still currently the plan, but we do need to do that remodelling work, which is, again, as Sam said, is taking slightly longer than we'd anticipated because of the care note outage. So we're hoping within the next, I don't know,
3 months.
3 months or so, we should be able to complete that work and we'll know the answer to that.
So also when we previously met, there was offers of training within schools to support schools with identifying young people with autism and then managing young people with autism. I wanted to know how that was going and how that was progressing and whether schools were engaging in that, and particularly around Nuneaton and Bedworth. But also, I wanted to ask about PDA, pathological demand avoidance, which I know that a lot of residents, from personal experience, schools refuse to acknowledge because it does not stand as a diagnosis on its own. Therefore, meaning many of the schools, including the special schools around Nuneaton, Bedworth, Warwickshire, are unable to take on young children with autism, PDA, and other issues, and they are being sent out of county at a cost of up to £57,000 a year per child. So I was just wondering of actually, you know, where that stands. Are Warwickshire going to start recognising PDA? Because I think that would be extremely helpful for parents, schools and the children, and I think that's one of the reasons why many children struggle with going into school.
We met earlier on and we talked about training, and I believe my colleague referred some of the context about the training to you, because for Commonwealth and Warwickshire Partnership Trust, we don't deliver the training ourselves, so I'm unable to comment more about it. But certainly I can take your question and I can feed back to my colleague to see if we can find out any more information. With regards to PDA, again, it'll be difficult for me to comment. I'm not sure about that aspect really.
Yeah, well, just to pick up the point about pathological demand avoidance, PDA. So in terms of psychiatric diagnosis, we rely on international classification systems, so the ICD-11, which is the World Health Organization, or DSM-5, which is the American Psychiatric Association. Neither of those systems recognise PDA as a standalone diagnosis, but it is very well recognised, described pattern of behaviours, cluster of behaviours, which are often associated with a diagnosis of autism. I suppose it's, I think probably the more important answer to the question though is that the educational offer to the child shouldn't be based on the diagnosis, whether that's autism or PDA. It should be based on a assessment of need, and it would be valid to describe the way a child responds to demands as part of that, but that's separate to the role CWPT play, which is an autism diagnosis service.
Further on that, so the diagnostic assessment capacity is one part of the strategy for autism. There's different elements to it, and one of which is that graduated approach that Richard's talked about to support in schools. So we're developing a graduated approach for support, which shouldn't be reliant on having a diagnosis. Obviously, diagnosis and more specialist support, and that's what we need to tackle, because there's certainly views out there that support is a diagnosis is required to get any support. So that graduated approach is being developed with education colleagues within Warwickshire County Council, and we will be rolling that out to schools over the next 8 to 12 months. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Inquiry. So I'm aware that Warwickshire schools are able to access the Autism Education Trust training. I don't have current figures, but I know at the end of the spring term 74 schools had signed up to that across Warwickshire, and we can go back to our education colleagues to clarify up-to-date data on that and whether they can break it down to the district and borough level as well. We've also got a community autism support service, and within that there is an offer for professionals to access toolkits and training sessions as well. So that's a newly launched recommissioned service that began on the 1st of April, and we're currently actively promoting that and encouraging professionals to access that training and toolkit opportunity.
Thank you.
One, we've got very long waiting times, but obviously people may have different levels of apparent need. So are the people you think or have got higher levels of need effectively got a shorter wait, or is everyone going in one large queue? And the second question was, out of the assessment process, are we seeing more people assessed as being of more need, or is results changing? Because obviously, if you test something more or a larger group of people, you will get a different histogram of severity or mildness. And I know it's a spectrum. It's not like an MOT test, you pass or you fail. But are the results of the assessments changing to what they were 10 years ago?
Thanks, Councillor Kandaka. In terms of the prioritization, we do that at the very start. So whenever there's a referral that comes in, we triage the referrals. And actually, it's grouped to either whether you are, for example, a looked after child, or you have a scale or different needs, and you get seen quicker than other people who get referred and don't have those kind of prioritization needs. There is a set of prioritization criteria that we can share if people want to see it. The second element is around diagnostic. And I think on some level, what we've been looking at this for quite some time because of the increased referral rates. And really our diagnosis rate still remains very high at about 90%. And I think what we found is that a lot of the people that we are diagnosing, they are impaired by their autism. They're significantly affected by their autism. So there isn't some sort of gaming in the system or whether there's a loosening of the criteria. We are still diagnosing people who really need to be supported and to be diagnosed.
Question from Councillor Beetham, and then unless there's anything from, as you know, indication, we'll move on. Councillor Beetham.
Earlier, cabinet support, so I can actually answer some of Councillor Shire's questions about, and in regards to autism education trust training, I have the figures here, not just for Nuneaton, I haven't got that broken down yet, but 70% of primary schools across Warwickshire have had the training uptake, 46 of secondary schools at the moment, and of course if you email me I can get you a better breakdown. Perfect.
Attendance this evening, and we will continue to maintain our relationship with you to make sure that we get to where we need to be with referrals. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you. So item number 9 on the agenda is the impact of antisocial behaviour on the housing revenue account, and I'm pleased that we've got Nicola with us, our new Assistant Director for Social Housing and Community Safety. Nicola, would you like to present your report? I think it's now the one on the left. Or, no. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Got there in the end. Thank you, Chair. So this report follows the previous report that I presented to the panel on the 27th of October 2022. So for the financial year 2022-2023, there were a total of 7 eviction warrants executed, all relating to rent arrears and antisocial behaviour. There was a total of £12,869.51 worth of repairs carried out in 22-23 to all properties that had a case of antisocial behaviour attached to them. The costs are outlined in Appendix 1 and include all repairs that require to the property, and they weren't just repairs just relating to willful damage, they were repairs that we needed to carry out. So throughout 22-23, a total of £8,036.67 has been identified as rechargeable repairs. 2 properties do not have a recharge raised against them due to a crime number being provided. So if damage is a result of a malicious act by a third party and a crime number has been provided by to the council within 7 working days, then the cost of those recharges will be written off under the recharge policy. So in this case, the total write-off is £2,013.52. Regrettably, teams have dealt with criminal damage in Mount Pleasant Road Flats and Buckingham Court just recently, which has resulted in £2,819.32 worth of damage. Communal doors have been damaged, along with fire alarm panels being smashed. We are actively working with the police regarding this and have deployed additional CCTV in the area. And if we do identify the perpetrator, then we will, of course, recharge them for any damage that they have caused. I've reiterated to my teams the importance of raising and collecting recharges. So for the last financial year, the Council have collected a total of £12,318.30 as detailed within the report. And to highlight how serious a problem that antisocial behaviour is within our housing stock, we had a total of 464 cases reported in the last financial year. The highest ASB reported categories being noise, drugs, harassment, intimidation and threats, which include verbal abuse and violence and youth issues. The wards with the most reported ASB were Abbey Ward and the Camp Hill Ward, and the team have been successful in securing 10 possession orders, 8 injunction orders, 15 acceptable behaviour contracts and 5 community protection warnings. So teams will continue to manage and monitor ASB within our properties and neighbourhoods to ensure that the HRA does not continue to pay out large sums of money for damages, and we will continue to raise and recover recharges where we can.
Nicola, thank you very much. Are there any members that would like to come in on this item? Councillor Shires.
Thank you. And thank you, Nicola. I have to say, I'm really pleased that Camp Hill is on there for reporting the ASB issues. And while that may seem a very bizarre thing to say, but it's taken an awful lot of engagement and teamwork to encourage the residents to actually come forward with the issues. And with them doing that, it has meant we've had some really positive results, I think we can say. And as a team, the council and the police and residents have just been phenomenal. So while in one way it's like, oh my gosh, it's Camp Hill yet again, actually everybody has come together working as a brilliant community to resolve the issues, and we need people to report issues to enable us to actually take action and make communities safer and more desirable to live. So I just wanted to point that out, really, that although it's a high number and it's like, oh my God, we're there, actually we've been working really hard together for that. And I think hats off to you all, because, yeah, you've all done absolutely fantastic, and residents are really, really pleased. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kandaka.
Things reported, yeah, actually, it's when things aren't reported is when we've got a problem, because they just fester and get worse and worse, and then we get an even more serious incident. We also have a lot of this going on in the new housing, and if you look at the numbers here, 7 cases in our housing stock. We've got about 5,000, 5,500, so it's about 0.1%, yeah, 1 in 900 or something of our homes. So you're going to have the same sort of ratio in our social housing stock that's managed by Orbit and Midland Heart and all these things. Do we actually talk with those other organisations so that people who get evicted from our housing stock then don't cause a problem in the commercial housing stock, or how did it work then? Because obviously we're actually creating someone who's homeless. I mean, it's their own fault, but yeah, how do you make sure we're just not moving the problem around?
There we go. So if somebody is evicted for antisocial behaviour and they live in, let's say, a housing association property, and they came to us as homeless, then we would obviously look at their case, but it could be that they're found intentionally homeless because they've been causing antisocial behaviour in their previous property. So it may be that after our investigation that we wouldn't offer them housing within our stock itself. But, well, housing associations don't have a duty like we do. So if it's homelessness, we have the homelessness duty as a local council. Housing associations don't have that.
I think one of the issues that we're seeing on the newer housing estates and I'm only talking here anecdotally about the estate in Weddington, north of Weddington. What is the estate north of Weddington called? Vale, is it Vale? What was it? Sorry, Lower Farm. Lower Farm. There are pockets of is it Orbit housing on that estate where there are ASB issues, and I'm not saying that it's our responsibility as a borough council to deal with that because it's not our stock. But what I wanted to know was if, let's say, if Bromford or Orbit had to evict someone, would they, if they lived within this area, would they notify the housing department, look, Mr. X may come to you to apply for housing?
Yes, they possibly will, but then obviously we'll go through those details with that applicant if they approached us for housing, and then we would ask for references from the housing association. But not only that, we have regular monthly meetings with the housing associations and police and everybody else, so we all make sure that everybody's working in harmony, that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet and dealing with the issues that we need to deal with in that area. So it's not as if we don't talk to each other, we do talk to each other. But like I say, if an applicant approached us for housing, then we would ask that specific housing association for references before we offered any accommodation to them ourselves. And that's when we'd find whether or not they've been intentionally homeless.
That answers my question, so that's good. Is there any other member of the committee that would like to come in on this? Okay, what I'm going to sort of conclude on this is that I think what we would like to see is for it's not your department, I accept, but I think the communications team at the council need to sort of get these figures out and do some graphics for social media, just to hammer home that the true cost that this has on our HRA. And essentially, let's be very clear, it's our tenants through their rents who are having to pay for this, and it's just not on. We have a responsibility, of course, to rectify damages, but at the end of the day, and I'm talking about a very small number of tenants here, incredible minority, but it's just not on, and I think we need to make the public aware of these figures. So, no, we shouldn't. No, absolutely, we shouldn't demonise our tenants. As I say, no, I think it should be borough-wide. I think it should be borough-wide. As I say, the vast majority of our tenants are good tenants, a lot of whom have been with this council for many years. But there is a very, very small minority who ruin it for the rest. And, quite frankly, we are stamping hard on those individuals, and it's right that we do so. So, Nicola, if you'd be able to perhaps link up with communications to try and get something out there, and if you could let me know what progress is being made on that in the next month or two, that would be really good. Okay. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the integrated performance report for the fourth quarter of 2022-2023. As always, I understand that Steve Gore is on the line, I think.
That's correct, Chair.
You are. There we go. Can we see? Will we see you? There we go. We can see you. We can see you. Good.
Good.
As always, Steve, if there's any if there's any sort of highlights or anything specifically you'd like to bring to our attention, please do. But obviously, we've all read the data and the report. So, if there's anything in particular that you'd like to bring to our attention, please do.
Well, it wouldn't take too long to go through this summary, Chair.
Go ahead.
But there are one or 2 points on the strategic risk register that are not in the report.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the integrated performance report summary for the fourth quarter 2022-23 is as follows. Appendix A, finance linked to performance. The first thing to say is that finance data is not available as the final outturn is being reported to Cabinet in July, and a subsequent report will be provided to scrutiny panels. In relation to performance of the 7 measures, 2 have improved, 3 declined and 2 stayed the same. The declined measures are length of stay in bed and breakfast, processing of private sector disabled facility grants, and relet of property end-to-end times. Appendix B, the Strategic Risk Register, the fourth quarter breakdown shows that of the 4 risks within the remit of the panel, 1 is net red and 3 are net green. Net meaning given the mitigations that have been put in place. The net red risk is R1, potential failure to provide adequate accommodation to meet the needs of the borough. The key updates to the register this quarter, which is not within the report, so I usually give this back for verbally. R1, accommodation needs. A planned action has been added relating to a fundamental review of the HRA business plan to identify options for increased social housing delivery. R5, crime and disorder. A planned action has been added to review the capacity of the community safety team to ensure appropriate delivery of all initiatives. And R6, arson or accidental fire. The mitigation has been updated referencing the internal audit of fire risk arrangements. Appendix C, the Strategic Performance Report Executive Summary. This shows that 8 of the measures are classed as green, 3 are amber, and 4 are red. The amber and red measures, in no particular order, are rent collection, processing of new benefits claims, working days lost to short-term sickness absence, working days lost to long-term sickness absence, short-term return to work interview compliance, building a better borough corporate plan monitoring, and staff annual development reviews. Appendix D, freedom of information and environmental information requests. The end of year summary shows that 761 were received, 755 completed, 143 were outside the 20-day response time, and 6 were outstanding. And finally, Appendix E, the complaints end of year summary. 1,102 were received, 1,092 were completed, 262 of these were outside the 10-day response time, and 10 were outstanding. And that completes the summary, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any members that would like to come in on this item? Nice. Councillor Kandaka.
Picked up in several places, but on the risk register and our performance is actually the housing crisis we've got at the moment. Not because there aren't enough houses, but people are being kicked out by landlords or can't afford rents, etc. So the number of people in our bed and breakfast for weeks is going up and up. It'll be useful on that table where it says the average week wait is now 11 weeks to actually say the numbers times the length, because obviously it's a volume effectively we're looking at, and one of the problems is we're getting more people as soon presenting, and it has a bit of that in the wordage, but that's a problem. And in terms of the availability of social housing, we've got the 14 units that the council provides will be temporary and stocking forward. But we've also got something like 56 houses built on the A5 that can't be occupied because the social landlord has mucked up agreeing on access off the A5. So there's various things where there is a pipeline of social housing, quite often private, that is going wrong. So we report in our performance reports the percentage of our housing applications of social housing. But I think we do need to monitor and look at that a bit. Thank you.
I'm just interested, the case off the A5, which I saw in the Nuneaton news 2 weeks back, I remember, the proportion, I presume there's a proportion of affordable housing in that, and if so, who was that to?
Affordable housing, it would make a good chunk of our housing thing to suddenly get 56 or whatever it was affordable.
Related, but what's the delay? Is it the Highways Department or is it Midland Heart?
As I understand, they had the access agreed before they started building, and they started building anyway, and it seemed to slip between all the cracks. So they built these 56 houses that cannot legally be occupied. And it's an almighty fiasco. But I say, it's something that should, the sort of thing we should be chasing or trying to assist and just monitoring, because a lot of these similar schemes will have problems with borrowing or planning or whatever. And in trying to look at our red risk of not enough affordable housing, the failure of the Midland Heart and Orbit, all these schemes, is going to be something that's going to cause.
But is it Midland Heart? It's not Highways. It is Midland Heart. You think?
Midland Heart, because they built it without the condition being right for them to go ahead. So all in here debugged and
the ward councillor, so you'll know the history around this better than I. But if you'd like me as chair of this housing committee to write to Midland Heart, if you feel that would be of use, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Could you write ways that need to agree with Midland Heart? And also, it's actually technically in St Nicholas ward, because as you go along the A5, it tags on, it's A5 aquatic, so it tags on to the end of the long shoot.
Councillor then? Yes, okay. Okay, well, Steve, sorry, was there anything you wanted to pick up from what Councillor Kandaka said in his first part? I don't think there was anything to pick up on, but...
I don't think that was particularly in the integrated performance report, the housing query about the fact. I know you touched on the point about the strategic risk register, that R1 accommodation needs. You know, it's a tough battle for us with the demand, but so I wouldn't know the details of what the housing people are up against specifically.
No, sure, absolutely, yes. Councillor Beetham, I see you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah. So it's more of just comments along here. So I believe it's with, was it risk register? Just trying to find the page quickly. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, it's in one of the appendixes. I think it's Appendix C. It's and follows quite closely up with affordable homes. It's quite nice to see that planning permission has actually gone 27% against a target of 25% for affordable homes, especially with how we are at the moment within the borough, and well, just generally across. And also just to put on record for the parks team, having a look at the formal areas and the informal areas compared to this time last year's performance is an absolute improvement, and that park should be quite proud of that improvement. That's all. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any other contributions from the panel? Councillor Kandaka.
That if the financial information is available in July, I think Steve said, that we could actually have an update as just a note to the panel on the financial information for this panel.
Steve can consider that. But Steve, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, yes, Chair. I've got a note to, or Vicky did ask, that's the Strategic Director for Finance and Governance, asked me to contact her shortly after the Cabinet meeting so that we can, you know, pull the report together and discuss timescales. I'm sure we're going to try and get it out as soon as we can after the Cabinet meeting. But I can't give a definite timescale on that.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, I think we'll move on. So the next item on the agenda, item 11, we have a work programme suggestion form, which is on page 127. Just to remind members that in addition to this work programme, there is a rather substantial briefing note of yes, many hundreds of pages about this specific suggestion form. So this was submitted to this panel by Councillor Cape, and it's regarding the oversight of allocations for environmental offsetting and mitigation from Section 106 contributions. Having looked at the form, I think it's something that the council or an OSP should look at. I'm not entirely sure if it's within the remit of this OSP, however, to take this specific item forward. I think it lies better in the business regeneration and planning OSP, who inevitably have oversight for this specific area. And I do understand that the business regeneration and planning OSP has accepted this work programme for.
They had that report last, I think she's put it in there when it went to
Yes.
the RPOSP.
Yes.
Work programme to go back.
Yes. Now, if the business regeneration planning OSP, who I still genuinely believe this falls under, wanted to have, I think there is provisions in the Constitution to have a joint one-off meeting of the two OSPs to consider this specific area, then I, as the chair, would be happy for that to happen. Because I do understand the connection to the environment, but I suppose it'd be good to get feedback from members on what they would like to see. Go on, Councillor Kandaka.
So we need to get on top of, because the planning system keeps asking for money to offset the damage caused by development, and particularly up the top there at Manchester Road, there was a lot of environmental resource and biodiversity up there. So giving us the money then goes into the planning system, gives it to Councillor Guttridge's department, and they haven't got the capacity to progress all these going through as well. So I think it lands here if it's a question of we're not got the resources yet to actually do all this biodiversity. Because it's like the AHD autism and all these things. Nature just doesn't wait 5 years. If you trash an area and say, well, we'll give you some money to make it better, having a 5-year gap before you plant the trees or the ponds or whatever isn't helpful. So I think it is an environment issue. So I think this OSC could actually deal with it. Because we've already, the planning bit's done its bit in actually putting the condition in. So it's not the planning system that's failed, it's actually the park system that has failed to get funding or resources in some way to actually then do this work.
Just take Councillor Shires first.
Yeah, actually, I know what happened to the Section 106 money from the Owl Estates. I was just looking on my Facebook, so I'd put it on there. Some of it had gone to the allotments at the top of Camp Hill, some had gone to a park on Stockingford, and I can't remember where the last amount went, but it wasn't a massive amount of money. It wasn't massive, but besides, I think the allotments in Camp Hill being done, then nothing else went back into the estate. It was all distributed elsewhere. So I do think Section 106 money, we do actually need to be far more aware of where that money is being spent.
Okay, Councillor Beetham, I'll let you come in on this.
The committee wanting to a joint overview of it with the regeneration, and I think that is a perfect way forward for this.
I mean, you've stayed so long, so I'm happy to allow you to speak, Councillor Guttridge, on this item.
106 is very interesting because it is staged payments. And I'll be honest, we are building Buttermere Park and we're still waiting for some large amount of money. And that is from St Nicholas, which is about 8 or 9 years they started building, and we haven't got all the money yet. We are chasing it, and we have to chase via a certain member of staff via the planning. So a lot of it is stage payments. When I read this, I thought, I wonder what the conditions were, which they all set out with the planning officers, of when we will receive the money. When we receive the money, we can then spend it. We can't spend what we haven't got. Going back to the biodiversity, I've looked to try, I've planted wildflowers in Camp Hill, which I'm very keen on. And it's all right planting them, but what do we do after year 2, after year 1, year 2? What is the maintenance? And before I go planting across the whole borough, I would like to know the rough costs. We've done some at Bayton Lakes. We've done some at the Sloughs. We've tried 2 different systems at Camp Hill, drilling direct into the ground and burning the ground off and doing it like that. And we planted it in the spring and it came very wet. Also, we had problems up at Camp Hill, I'm very sorry, with motorbikes and people running across it with cars, but we got through that, and we will see later in this year what they come like, and then we will review it. But I'm not going to plant the whole borough in wildflowers and then all of a sudden think, what are we going to do after that? I'm very cautious once we've tried it out in Camp Hill, because we also have to remember that the borough across Nuneaton and Bedworth, it's different land conditions, different soil structures and different mixes. We might not have the right mix for Camp Hill or the right mix that we want to do with the borough, because I don't want to go along the lines of the carbuncle that we've got at the Hamburger Island. That, I was told from county, was wildflower meadow. Well, in my eyes, that is wildflower grass. I'd like to plant some buttercups, daisies, poppies, some yellow rattle, so that we can get some nature back into our place. So that's what we're doing. But going back to the 106, it's structured that it's for various things, and we have to work from there. But in my view, it's a planning issue. Because once the planning issue says, once they say that we've got the money, then we can spend it, or look to spend it to put it in the system.
I don't know who else I'm planning, I think, Brett, you are, that I just assumed that once everything had been agreed and planned and people were building, that they handed the money over. You're going to...
They did, because I could build playgrounds. It's like you get a bit from this developer when he does so many houses, when he does this, when he does that. And Councillor Condarca is saying, well, we should do it when it's 50 houses, where the planning committee or the developer has said it's when 100 houses, because they've got to make the money to pay the 106 money, because some of the 106 monies is is a lot of money. But we don't get it straight away. If we got it straight away, we could stick it into the budget and we could say, right, we're going to do this wildflower meadow, we're going to do this playground, we're going to do this allotment, but it is stage payments and you have to build it up. Now, I'll be honest, I could have gone a bit earlier at Buttermere Park, but why do half a job? When I'd got the lot, we could do a full-blown job at Buttermere Park, because we could have done half of it and then had to do the other half, which would mean we'd have to jigger up the first half. So I've waited till we've got it all, and we're out for tender at the moment. Hopefully we'll get the tenders back in the next week or two. Then they can go through the various systems within the council, and we can appoint a contractor to hopefully start in September, so that we'll get it completed after the kiddies have gone back to school for the autumn. But that's taken, I think, 8 or 9 years. And we're very hot in the parks because we've got a chart, red, amber and green, and I've got a very good lad in there, Julian Webb, who is chasing. But it's stage payments.
Role of the council, when we looked through the books in the first few weeks, Councillor Goodrich will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were some cases where there were Section 106 contributions from like 2006, which we hadn't managed to recuperate. So it is all phased, and it is over many years in most cases, but not earlier than 2006. Go on.
Yes, we inherited a system where they got money and they hadn't spent it, and we were having I'll be honest, no win, no fee solicitors saying, what have you spent it on? Because if you don't spend it, the developer can have it back. So that's why we got into action pretty quick. We got a traffic light system in the parks, and we started, and we got various play equipment that we could add to various sites. We did Kersley, Stockingford, Bolkington, because we used the 106 money and a little bit of money that I'd got from the cabinet.
On this, I think I'm a bit sort of like, you know, my gut feeling is this lies with planning, but I get the connection to the environment on this. So I'm going to recommend that they, subject to approval from the Business Regeneration and Planning OSP, that we have a one-off joint OSP meeting, which you can, I believe, do under the Constitution, to discuss this one item alone. Is that, do you understand that? Yeah, yeah. Does that have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Beetham. I'll put that to a vote. Is any member, well, all those in favour of that recommendation, please show. Okay, well that is unanimous. Okay, so that we've got an avenue to take that forward. Okay, so I'm on the wrong piece of paper now. So item 12 is the forward plan, which is on page 129. Does any member wish to speak on the forward plan? I see no indication. Item 13 is the work programme for 2023-2024 for approval. That's attached on page 140. Can I propose the work programme? Does that receive a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Beetham. All those who do want to speak on this item, Councillor Kondarka?
Looking at is our independent living service, because it was about 6 or 7 years ago we lost the wardens in our independent living places, and I think the housing departments do some reviews anyway, and I think it's probably it's timely to actually, after 6 or 7 years, having a look at the service we've now got with the independent living officers. Some people are paying for it and getting nothing. Some people it'll be a lifeline for, and I think as we haven't really done a good review, and I know there's lots of reconfiguration in the housing department as well. We're probably looking at bits. It might be something that could come up during this year to get a sort of note.
Submit a works programme scrutiny suggestion form for us to discuss at next meeting. I'm happy for that to come forward. I would be grateful if you could outline on that form what you would hope to achieve from the scrutiny process and what benefit it would bring to the scrutiny process. But if you want to submit that form, I'm happy for that to be on the agenda at the next meeting, Maria. Any other member? So I'll put the work programme to a vote. All those in favour, please show. I think that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 14, any other items? I don't have any other items that I wish to bring forward, but I see that Councillor Kondarka is wanting to speak on AOB. Go ahead.
Yes, it told us about the parks inquiries or whatever, because it is actually quite useful, particularly the breakdown by ward, because I mean my wards and most of the other wards have about 180 parks inquiries a year, so it's fairly level across the board. Some wards, a lot of inquiries come from members. Some wards, it's all from the public. I think Heath has no members, but several public. But this information is very useful to encourage people to use the system. And it also counteracts the idea that I never report anything.
That I did request that briefing be sent because I found it was important that Parks bring something forward to the committee. But on what you've just specifically raised about referrals on park complaints, I'm going to put my hands up here. I report a lot of ground maintenance issues, parks, wherever it is. I don't do it through the councillor system. I do it as a member of the public through the customer service portal. That's just the way that I've always done it. I still get the same. It's still resolved in the same way, but if my ward shows that I haven't reported anything, it's because I don't report it through the councillor system. I report it through the customer services portal, and that's the way that I've always done it. And I do keep an Excel spreadsheet, Councillor Kondarka, of all the things I report through customer services with the reference numbers, which I'm more than happy to provide if any member of the public wants to scrutinise my action on that.
That most wards have a similar number. It's about 200 inquiries per ward, and it doesn't actually matter whether it's a councillor or and quite a lot of stuff gets reported by my wife, but that doesn't matter because it just means we report about 190 incidents every year, and Julian's lot go and sort out most of them.
Councillor,
because I thought we might have a little bit of interest. Yes, there is an anomaly. The Heath ward isn't there. There's part of it, but not the other part. I picked that up, and I've asked the parks to look at that. The thing that interests me the most was issued by the team. When you break it down, the grand totals of what we get problems with, i.e. bins, damage to park features, grass, hedge, other play equipment, trees, weeds, and it shows where we understand in the parks team where we are struggling a little bit. I have one man that does 122,000 trees and comments on the planning and various other things, and he's got 631 complaints. So I am looking to see what we can do to bring somebody in 1 day or 2 days a week type of thing. Hedge and shrub variegation. I do have trouble with shrub beds. They're on a 5-year rotation system, and we are looking to re-evaluate that, which we are talked constantly with our ground care contractor and everything. But the thing that I was quite intrigued by was we got 2,891 total complaints. When you break that back down to the amount of operations that the contractor does, which is about 200, they do about approximately 20,000 operations per month, the ground care contractor does. So I times that by 12, that's 240, and then worked out the percentage of 2,891. So it's about 1.2% of complaints against what we're doing in the parks team at AOB. So I'm thinking, not being standing on our laurels, but there's 98% of the borough people think that we're doing a fair job. And I have to admit this year, the parks team, the contractor, is done very, very well. We've had slight hiccups, and we're not the best, we're not the worst, but we get the job done, and we will be coming to full OSP in October, because I want to, they were due to come this month, but I want them to come in October so that we can evaluate the whole of the grass cutting season. We'll have done the season because we start in March and usually finish in December, but it's similar to in my other working thing on a harvest, with farming and harvest. We had a harvest meeting first week in October, so we could sit down and see what we'd done right and what we'd done wrong. So we are looking better, but we still can't sit on our laurels. And I have to admit that the contractor this year has got the job right. We've had 1 or 2 hiccups, I'll bring it up, with bedding plants in All Saints Square. And I would say again, we are bedding All Saints Square. What we do is we strip out the whole Rivesley Park and Bedworth and then go back and pit them. We've done the almshouses, we finished miners' welfare, we've about finished Rivesley, and we will go back and do the town centres of Bedworth and Nuneaton. And I'll say it again because no doubt somebody will be on Facebook. We are going to bed out All Saints Square. We've done a press release. I've done some videos ready to put out, and I'm going to do some more in Rivesley, because I think that the parks features, the plants are outstanding. This year I particularly think the hanging baskets are outstanding, and we put a lot out. And I think that when you go and look in our parks, Miners and Rivesley, it's a credit to the ground staff and the parks team. We even had people take photographs of in Miners with the daffodils, and it was my idea to put the daffodils in. Let's put the daffodils in, and we'll leave them so that they'll naturalise, and in various places we haven't cut the grass because we've got to let them die down. But then we'll carry on with that, and let's make our parks proud that we can go in the parks and look at the proper flowers, and it's nice. Enough of my ranting. Thank you.
Pete, to stop the fake news, we are bedding All Saints Square this year. I don't know how many times we can say it. I don't think it's going to stop the fake news on social media and the conspiracy theories, but we are doing the bedding in All Saints Square this year. I don't know how clear we can make it. I think the hanging baskets have already been done. I think with almshouses, we haven't already done that. It's about to be done. It's already done, and it's coming soon. But we're not going to rush things. We do it right, and we're going to do it at the right time of the year. So.
The bedding plans come from a nursery in North Warwickshire.
Mm.
We only have so many staff, so we don't want all the bedding plans to come all at once, because then we're going to get into problems. So we're having them as our classes just in time. And we know where we're going, subject to whether they're brought to them and they put them in. And it's now in the towns. And I know for a fact, I've talked to the lads this afternoon in Ruby Park, we will be bedding out All Saints Square. And I've talked to the parks manager, the contract manager, the nursery manager, the plants are ready. So we will do All Saints Square, even if I have to get me trial out myself.
We just wanted to reiterate the point, Councillor Kandaka, given that obviously some of your recent posts on social media which were conflating that. So we are putting the bedding plants in All Saints Square. And on that note, I'm going to end the meeting. Order. Thank you.